So thank you all for being here. Welcome to the astrological weather report for the February new moon cycle that begins today with the Aquarius new moon on February 11th and will extend through March 12th. And that's what we're going to look at today. So as the February lunar month unfolds, we move from the heady and sometimes haughty determined atmosphere of Aquarius, and we are washed by the now tranquil, now turbulent, briny currents of Pisces. What has become separated and individuated must now rejoin the whole. In the Northern Hemisphere, the chill winds of winter can compel us to go inside ourselves to find a new place of peaceful solitude. In the Southern realms, the balmy gusts of summer can draw us out of doors to merge with all of the creations of nature that surrounds us. The Aquarius new moon will keep us active as we adjust our path through the twists and turns of our collective spaces of family, friends, work, and intimate relationships. A cosmic exhalation of life force collides with time and space, providing life lessons that expose us to who it is we are becoming. Free-flowing personal narratives oblige us to go inward. Relationships can take on a life of their own that open new pathways of mutual understanding. Our choices become more considered. We can learn to walk our paths together with our partners with passion and purpose. The connection to self deepens as we connect to whatever we define as sacred. And I thank my good friend Julie Schumer so much for sharing this image, and you can find her at julieschumer.com. So these are the transits that we're going to look at today. The Aquarius new moon stimulates our creativity and our lucidity. The Virgo full moon will find us meeting the world with our sleeves rolled up. A mutable Grand Cross has circled above us since November 25th, as Neptune in Pisces opposes Vesta in Virgo, both squaring the lunar nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius. This powerful configuration will persist through mid-March. A mutable cross is potentiated with adaptability and change. Gemini and Sagittarius are about opinions, truths, and beliefs. With the squares from Neptune and Vesta, the mental mix expands to include ultimate truth and authenticity, but also falsehood, mystical isolation, and spiritual superiority. Moods will shift as the Aquarius sun dissolves into Pisces. The Grand Cross will play out as the Sun and Venus ingress into Pisces. The sun will feel a bit more out of touch as it transits through Pisces, orphaned, aspecting only Mars, Asteroids, Pallas, and Vesta. The conjunction of Venus and Jupiter ushers in a new chapter of relationship growth. The first of three Saturn-Uranus squares perfects on February 17th. Mercury turns direct, but lingers in his shadow through mid-March. As Venus joins the sun in Pisces, we begin a new relationship cycle that can teach us the difference between conditional, I love you if, and unconditional love. The inner transformations that we are experiencing are drawing in new outbound adventures. As Mars moves into Gemini, actions can become words and words can become actions. So you see here, there are not quite as many major transits this month as there have been in the last couple of months. Clearly, we have the two lunations, the Aquarius new moon on the 11th and the Virgo full moon on the 27th. The major aspect, in my opinion, this month is the Saturn square Uranus, which will carry out across the year. There will be two more later in the year, and I'll discuss that later in this talk. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingresses from the Sun, Ceres, Venus, Mars, and Pallas Athena. And as I alluded to, and I'll touch on again a little bit later, there are only really two important aspects, two solar transits. The Sun is going to feel quite isolated in his Pisces mode this month. At the new moon, there are 6 planets plus Pallas Athena in Aquarius. An Aquarius stellium of this magnitude has not occurred since 1962. And actually, there was a meme that was circulating around Facebook. It's not only uh, fake news; it was bad astrology that this stellium has not occurred since the Middle Ages. It's not true. Sheryl Crow was born in 1962 on February 11th with 5 planets, an asteroid, and the lunar south node in Aquarius. So on February 11th, the new moon occurs at 23 degrees Aquarius as the Aquarius moon perfects to a new phase conjunction to the Aquarius sun. The moon separates from a partile first quarter square to Jupiter in Aquarius, and and Venus, which is the dispositor of Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, separates from a partile new phase conjunction to Jupiter in Aquarius. The need for our individuality emerges. We can be consciously proactive, or we can be instinctively reactive to events as they occur, running pre-recorded emotional processes. Time and space weighs heavily and asks, how did we get here? And how do we find our way forward? We will experience personal circumstances and outer world events that compel us to re-examine where our values and our self-worth is leading us and who or what it is attracting in order to clarify and revise our personal and collective priorities. The moon separates from a last quarter square to Mars in Taurus. It separates from a balsamic semi-square to Chiron in Aries, and it separates from a new phase conjunction to Pallas Athena, also in Aquarius. The measure of our self-worth sets the tone of our behavior, and it's reflected in our choices and our pursuits. We can feel emotionally and spiritually exhausted by the quote options which face us and want to push back against the duress of the outer world. Personal wounds result from the pressures to conform to the collective. The wounds, however, are lessons that can lead to identifying our own unique individuality. Interruptions to our normalcy create a new awareness, which reveals inner truths that redefine our self-understanding. And the moon separates from a disseminating trine to the lunar north node in Gemini and a crescent sextile to the lunar south node in Sagittarius. The moon applies to a crescent square to Black Moon Lilith retrograde in Taurus, and the moon separates from a crescent square to Sedna in Taurus. Opportunities arise that provide emotional understanding of the past and reinvigorated passion for the future. Some personal truths lose their validity, and we realize that something missed as unimportant had significance. Anger and disappointment can lead to self-exile, needing emotional distance. Over time, erratic outer world events make us more conscious of the world around us that changes our relationship to ourself. Excuse me. At the new moon also, same time, Venus perfects to a partile new phase conjunction to Jupiter, which is the ruler of the lunar south node. At the conjunction, Venus separates from a new phase conjunction to Saturn in Aquarius. Venus applies to a last quarter square to Mars in Taurus. Venus separates from a last quarter square to Uranus in Taurus and separates from a balsamic semi-square to Ceres in Pisces. Venus applies to a disseminating trine to the lunar north node in Gemini and a crescent sextile to the lunar south node in Sagittarius, and separates from a full phase opposition to Hygeia retrograde in Leo. And Mercury, still retrograde, separates from a new phase conjunction to Venus in Aquarius. Relationships can be challenging this month. Circumstances emerge that generate new narratives and a new cycle of self-expression and actualization of our values and our priorities. Crises regarding conflicting relationship priorities cause relationship disruptions regarding personal choices that challenge essential needs. There's a struggle to maintain emotional balance. Opportunities show up to realign personal priorities, letting go of old ideas and precepts emerge. Health issues regarding proactive self-care remain on the table. On February 17th, the first of three last quarter squares from Saturn to Uranus and Taurus occurs, the three that will occur this year. The squares perfect again in June and December 2021. This event is arguably the most significant 2021 transit. However, in my humble opinion, after the not since the axial age Pluto era square, which has two more times to show up for us. There's a natural affinity in this combination of Uranus and Saturn, as both are co-rulers of Aquarius. Saturn is in Aquarius, and elementally, they are the union of air and earth. This year-long crisis in consciousness will put the wind at our backs. The decreasing stability of normalcy threatens our physical, emotional, and mental well-being. It can, however, promote our spiritual well-being. We are challenged to come back to our own inner resources and self-define our paths forward. The Taurus moon separates from a partile first quarter square to Saturn, and Venus, the ruler of Uranus, conjoins Jupiter in Aquarius, and I just discussed that. The Gemini lunar north node applies to a first quarter trine to Saturn, and the Sagittarius lunar north node applies to a last quarter sextile to Saturn. Sudden events erupt that can knock us off balance. It's harder to stay emotionally centered. The supply of essential resources like food, water, and basic household supplies fluctuates and is sometimes limited, threatening our security. We will experience personal and outer world events that compel us to examine where our values, priorities, and choices are leading us in order to redefine our personal and collective vision of the future. We are seeded with potential for a greater awareness of our connection to the world around us, the visible and the invisible. An understanding will emerge that we cannot go forward until we heal what is holding us hostage to the past. Black Moon Lilith applies to a first quarter trine to Saturn. Mercury retrograde conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius applies to a new phase conjunction to Saturn. Asteroid Hygeia retrograde separates from a full phase opposition to Saturn, and Saturn applies to a disseminating trine to Sedna in Taurus. Disruptive emotional currents can cause our thought processes to become erratic and jumbled. Traumatic memories reemerge. The source of our greatest concerns will be the immediate threats to our health and well-being. We will be shown the way for new forms and systems to be built that provide the foundations of new paradigms. The sense of isolation pervades the sun's entry into Pisces on February 18th, as he leaves behind the company of his community in Aquarius. He is orphaned, with only aspects to Mars, Pallas, Athena, and Sedna. Pisces is the rare soul who can see beyond the veil and bridge the distance between dimensions. Having a full complement of past experiences of each archetype, the Pisces sun can open its heart with compassionate understanding for all beings. Neptune's passage through its own deep waters of Pisces and its current square by transit to the lunar nodes correlates to collective delusion or groupthink. Psychology today defines groupthink as a phenomenon that occurs when a group of well-intentioned people make irrational or non-optimal decisions spurred by the urge to conform. The problematic or premature consensus that is characteristic of groupthink may be fueled by a particular agenda, or it may be due to group members valuing harmony and coherence above critical thought. When groups feel threatened, either physically or through threats to their identity, they may develop a strong us versus them mentality. This can prompt members to accept group perspectives, even when those perspectives don't necessarily align with their personal views. This correlates to the QAnon phenomenon and the behavior of the GOP. It also correlates to the liberal left that has the potential to descend back into complacency. CNN is reporting that despite case numbers still raging and death tolls exceeding the country's worst nightmares, America's perception of the coronavirus risk is at its lowest since October, a new study finds. In related news, more states are easing their COVID-19 restrictions despite expert warnings that the US is not in the clear. Some of these relaxed restrictions are also shield businesses from legal liability in the case of COVID-19 transmission. So at the ingress, the sun separates from an out-of-sign new phase conjunction to Pallas Athena in Aquarius. The sun applies to a crescent square to Mars in Taurus, and the sun applies to a crescent square to Sedna in Taurus. The sun carries forward a rebellious, innovative, and sometimes disruptive agenda. Now, more transcendent strategies are whispered through waking and sleeping dreams. Crises emerge as we struggle with the realization that our choices must unequivocally reflect our essential needs. Compromise with anything less no longer seems possible. We are becoming more conscious and learning the lessons of fulfilling the priorities that only serve what is truly essential. On February 20th, Mercury stations direct, lingering in his shadow until March 12th. Excuse me. Mercury holds special importance as the ruler of the lunar north node in Gemini. At the station direct, Mercury separates from a disseminating trine to the moon in Gemini, partile conjunct to the lunar north node in Sagittarius. Mercury applies to a balsamic conjunction to Jupiter in Aquarius, ruler of the lunar north node. Mercury applies to a disseminating trine to the lunar north node in Gemini and applies to a crescent sextile to the lunar south node in Sagittarius. Mercury separates from a new phase conjunction to Saturn in Aquarius, separates from a last quarter trine to Uranus in Taurus, and Black Moon Lilith, retrograde in Taurus, applies to a first quarter square in Mercury station direct. We can see that at this station, Mercury is totally enveloped by the lunar nodes and with as ruler and with the ruler of its opposite node, the evolutionary and karmic axis. The disruptions and interruptions to our sense of normalcy have awakened us to a new sense of responsibility to ourselves and to the world around us. A new emotional understanding of the world around us brings new awareness of who we need to be. The future reaches back to meet us. On February 21st, Ceres will ingress Aries. At the ingress, Ceres separates from a balsamic semisquare to Jupiter in Aquarius, applies to a balsamic conjunction to Chiron in Aries, and applies to a disseminating trine to Hygeia retrograde in Leo. As Ceres moves away from Pisces, we can begin to free ourselves from any emotional abyss that has enveloped us. Our personal growth forward is facilitated by the recognition of our own strengths, gifts, and talents. We begin to reintegrate the fragments of ourselves that have become compartmentalized. We can now recognize the work that must be done in order to heal our perceived losses. On February 25th, Venus will ingress Pisces.
One moment.
Excuse me. Sorry, my phone is interrupting us. Relationships, Venus at the ingress, Venus applies to a balsamic conjunction to the sun in Pisces. Venus separates from an out of sign new phase conjunction to Pallas Athena in Aquarius, separates from a last quarter square to Mars in Taurus, and Venus separates from a last quarter square to Sedna in Taurus. Relationships dive into deeper emotional waters. The mutable cross between Neptune, Vesta, and the lunar nodes plays out as Vesta navigates through Pisces. The scales weigh the balance between conditional and unconditional love. A complete spectrum of Piscean experiences are in the field, ranging from the numinous to the cathartic. We are presented with lessons regarding the difference between conditional and unconditional love. New insights and the impetus to forgive ourselves and others softens our approach to our circumstances and relationships, by providing greater compassion and a deeper understanding. Life lessons emerge that show us why our priorities need to be challenged to be more in alignment with our essential needs. The Virgo full moon occurs on February 27th as the sun and moon form a full phase opposition. At the lunation, the moon separates from a full phase opposition to Venus in Pisces. The moon separates from a partile full phase in conjunct to Saturn in Aquarius. The moon separates from a first quarter trine to Uranus in Taurus. The moon separates from a gibbous in conjunct to Chiron in Aries, applies to a balsamic conjunction to Vesta in Virgo, and the moon applies to a disseminating square to the lunar north node in Sag and to a crescent square to the lunar north node in Gemini. We have new insights and impetus to forgive ourselves and others, and to approach our circumstances and relationships with greater compassion and a deeper understanding. Self-forgiveness underscores our emotional journey through the second half of this lunar cycle. The recognition comes that the inner bumps and bruises we have suffered are simply symptoms of our emotional imbalances. We are now being asked to take responsibility for our inner and outer world experiences, to reclaim our authenticity, and to use what we have learned as the template for our forward progress. On March 3rd, Mars will enter Gemini. At the ingress, Mars separates from a last quarter square to Venus in Pisces, applies to a first quarter trine to Saturn in Aquarius. Mars separates from an out of sign first quarter trine to Pluto in Capricorn, and Mars separates from our first quarter square to Pallas Athena in Aquarius. Are we listening and acting according to what our inner voice is telling us? Our choices and our actions potentially take on a more considered approach. Conversations are more heated and opinionated. Opportunities arrive for frank relationship discussions that facilitate personal growth. Personal crises bring new awareness to the responsibility of our choices and the recognition of our knee-jerk instinctual behavior. Words have power. Take responsibility for the actions and reactions that might result from the words we choose. Speak your truth, but recognize that it is probably more opinion than truth. Allow others the expression of their opinions as well. On March 7th, asteroid Pallas Athena enters Pisces. At the ingress, Mercury in Aquarius separates from an out-of-sign new phase conjunction to Pallas. Mars in Gemini separates from first quarter square to Pallas Athena, and asteroid Hygeia retrograde in Leo separates from a gibbous in conjunct to Pallas Athena. The still small voice within whispers louder and more intuitively, suggesting ways that we can be grounded and still be connected to that which is transcendent and greater than ourselves. Our strategies begin to disengage from any sense of displacement caused by the disruptive events that swirl around us, and to formulate new strategies for going forward. Choices become more proactive, but still driven by personal perspectives. New strategies are especially required to address our health self-care needs. So these are the important dates to watch. These are the dates and aspect points for the moon, the lunations, and these major transits. You can put these in your calendar if you don't have anything that pops up and tells you what's going on, just to know that that day stuff is happening. So self-forgiveness underscores the emotional journey through this lunar cycle. The recognition that the inner bumps and bruises we have suffered are the symptoms of any emotional imbalances that require healing. We're asked to take responsibility for our outer world experiences and to reclaim our authenticity and to use what we have learned as a template for our forward progress. Events erupt that compel us to re-examine where our lives and our sense of self-worth are leading us and who and what our priorities are attracting. The instability of normalcy threatens our self-understanding, threatens our emotional survival, and challenges us to come back to our own inner resources to define our path forward. The disruptions and interruptions to our sense of normalcy have often also brought new responsibility for ourselves and a greater awareness of our connection to the world around us. An understanding will emerge that tells us that we cannot go forward until we heal what is holding us hostage to the past. We can begin to redefine our understanding of who we are and how we need to grow, providing new insights and impetus to forgive ourselves and others, and to approach the circumstances of our lives and important relationships with greater compassion and greater, deeper understanding. Back in December, I wrote in the book 2021 hits the ground running at full speed. I was wrong. It's even faster than I thought. I wrote this book to explain why 2020 was so intense and what we can expect in 2021, and it still fills the bill. This is an evolutionary astrology forecast that contains the detailed astrology of all the significant events of this year. More importantly, it explains why the outer planets have been responsible for the suffering and anxiety that have been released in the world. And what the astrology means is presented in narratives that tell the whole story through mythology and previous historical timelines. Most importantly, this forecast reveals the opportunities and remedies for the times we are continuing to pass through. And it's available in 2 versions on Amazon. I encourage you all to download it and read it. It's quite affordable. This is where you can learn about me. I do consultations that answer the questions, who am I? Why am I here? What are my lessons? I'll do these astrological weather reports here on EA Zoom once a month. I do monthly forecasts and horoscopes on my website and daily forecasts on Facebook, on my website and on the Friends of Jeffrey Wolf Green Facebook page. And here's the number and my email address where you can reach me. I wish you all well. It's all going to be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.